Film is a disease, Frank Capra said. When it infects your bloodstream, it takes over as the number one hormone. It plays Iago to your psyche. As with heroin, the antidote to film is more film.
My name is Bond. James Bond. Since we first met, you've joined me on 9 of my missions. My latest, and if I'm not careful, my last assignment, will take me to new heights of adventure. New depths of danger. And new areas of excitement.
I have a message for you.
I think you just delivered it. I will come to grips with my most formidable adversaries, be up against the most fascinating women, and handle some of the most fantastic equipment you've ever seen. It won't be easy. But every job has its rewards. In this case, it's the spy who loved me.
Hello and welcome to my Celluloid Heart podcast, whatever you want to call it. It's another James Bond episode. Normally, like I've said, for anybody new, I'm sure you're not new, I usually take 2 movies, put them together by one theme or topic, and then I throw some facts in there. But this show, all about Bond, up until April 15th. Every episode will be one Bond movie leading up to that. What I've been missing out on is some of these, I did the Sean Connery bracket for the Bond films and the George Lazenby. So things that I missed out on. Live and Let Die. The theme was Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney. That's the best. The moment was I like the speedboat chase. There was a couple things in there. The speedboat chase, the rescuing of Solitaire, and of course jumping across the alligators. But I think the speedboat chase I really liked, especially when he came stopping on that grass and jumped out, got in the other one. That was awesome. Pre-credit was killing of those 3 different men, which is kind of cool. It didn't involve Bond, but it involved an agent, a couple agents, a couple of bad people. I mean good people, whatever. The gadget was the watch. It was magnetic, plus had the saw on it. I really liked the saw. The villain was Kananga, and Mr. Big, he's the same character. And the Bond girl was Solitaire, the beautiful Jane Seymour. So she's up there at the top. The Man with the Golden Gun, the theme was The Man with the Golden Gun, which I really like, by Lulu. And Live and Let Die, though, is the winner. But the second, maybe, I don't know. It's hard to say. Me and Brandt talk about it on this episode. Speaking of the coming up, it's going to be me and Brandt on The Spy Who Loved Me as soon as I'm done talking and giving you this stuff. So anyway, Lulu, the Man with the Golden Gun, very cool. The moment was a spiral bridge jump. Very cool, very awesome. The pre-credit sequence was the killing of the man that was paid... What? Sorry. Yeah, killing of the man that was paid to arrive. That other guy shows up to fight Scaramanga, and he loses, and they take his money back. So that guy, which he was also in Diamonds Are Forever. So that was cool. The gadget was the golden gun. It wasn't Bond's, but it was cool. Went together in 3 different parts. One was the cigarette lighter, one was a case, and one was, forget what the other one was. Anyway, the villain, of course, was Scaramanga, although Knick Knack was cool as well, but Scaramanga's more the villain. And the Bond girl was Maud Adams as Andre Anders. And the best lines, because me and Joe Merle, we were doing the show, we were recording Moonraker, and he was like, you really should put in best lines for these movies. And I was like, you know what, you're probably right. And what I meant was, I kind of explained it on the Man with the Golden Gun episode, And here's the dialogue that I really like. So M says, "What do you know about a man called Scaramanga 007? James Bond says, "Scaramanga. Oh, yes. The man with the golden gun, born in the circus. Father, the ringmaster, possibly Cuban. Mother, English, a snake charmer. He was a spectacular trick shot artist by the time he was 10 and a Rio gunman at 15. The KGB recruited him there and trained him in Europe, where he became an overworked, underpaid assassin. He went independent in the late 50s. Current price, $1 million a hit. No photograph on file, but he does have one distinguishing feature. However, a superfluous papilla." M says, "A what?" James Bond says, "A mammary gland. A third nipple, sir. He uses a golden bullet, hence man with a golden gun. Present domicile, unknown." So those are the things I'm talking about. Like, Bond will lay out this whole thing. What do you know about? Bond gives this whole speech. So it's pretty interesting, pretty cool. And for this one, I'll go ahead and tell you my favorite for The Spy Who Loved Me. I should have done it for the next episode. But anyway, the theme for The Spy Who Loved Me is "Nobody Does It Better" by Carly Simon. It's a great song. The moment is Killing Sandor, or Sandor, however you want to say it, when he's holding Bond's tie and Bond just knocks him off the building and he falls to his death. Pre-credit sequence is a Union flag parachute scene. Fucking the best, the most awesome. For a long time, just like Brandt, this was my favorite Bond film of all. Spy Who Loved Me. I loved it. I still love it. Excuse me, but I still love it, but sometimes there's things that you notice, maybe you like different ones better, but anyway, still love it. I'm not going to take that away. The gadget was a Lotus, badass fucking submarine Lotus. That's why the Union Jack and the Lotus alone are like the best. The villain is Stromberg. We kind of say he might be a lame villain, but he's actually pretty cool. He's kind of quiet, unassuming, and those are the deadly ones. I was thinking about that today. The Bond girl, Major Anya Amasova, played by Barbara Bach. So she might be the best Bond girl just because she has this sexiness to her. Best lines, and the best lines on this one that I really liked was, we kind of touch on it in here, but she says, "Commander James Bond, recruited to the British Secret Service from the Royal Navy, licensed to kill, and has done so on numerous occasions. Many lady friends, but married only once. Wife killed," and Bond interrupts her. "All right, you made your point." She says, "You're sensitive, Mr. Bond." He says, "About some things." So I really like that. Very cool. I like how she brings that up, and he's just like, "What?" Anyway, now we're going to get to The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977. I'm going to play you the theme song a little bit, and we'll get into it. Yeah, let's do this.
Nobody does it better. Makes me feel sad for the rest. Nobody does it half as good as you. Baby, you're the best.
All right, so I just played. I've already explained to people that I'm here with Brandt, the Brandt Spectacular,
Hello.
Red Shirt Man. And so we haven't done an episode since Allied Forces of World War II. No, the military
yeah, the
heist.
Three Kings.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
What other one? I
And
don't know.
Frontier, Triple
Yeah,
Frontier.
the one that's on Netflix. Yeah,
Yeah.
That was the last time. So it's been a while.
But yes, welcome back.
Thank
and
you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I just played the theme song.
that might be the best James Bond song.
Now, see, I went through the others to spoil it for you because you haven't listened to the others yet. But my favorite out of all the Sean Connery is Goldfinger.
Yep.
And out of these Roger Moore's, I really like this one. I like the fun of The Man with the Golden Gun because it's kind of.
I don't remember that song, honestly. Live and Let Die is a good one.
And Live and Let Die might be my top.
Yeah, Live and Let Die
favorite.
And this
And this
Nobody
one.
Does It Better.
And then For Your Eyes Only. So it might be 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, but those are also, they were both really big hits.
Yeah.
And they're still played on radio stations, not associated with James Bond now.
Yeah.
So they both have a life of their own outside of the movies.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of the other films' theme songs have done that.
I believe you're right. Well, except right, they sometimes like the Chris Cornell. Like I think that was out for a while, but
right, but it doesn't have like a long-standing legacy.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
You will hear those.
You'll hear the '70s,
on classic radio and stuff. Just it'll pop up and great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you won't hear. I'm with you. So we're here to talk about The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977. The plot is James Bond investigates a hijacking of British and Russian submarines carrying nuclear warheads with the help of a KGB agent whose lover he killed. Roger Moore is James Bond. Barbara Bach is Major Anya Amasova, XXX. And here's an interesting fact. Catherine Deneuve wanted to play like the female lead, and she wanted it so badly that she was going to cut her normal rate from $400,000 per picture. That seems like a lot. Even back in the 70s, to $250,000, and negotiations continued almost up until filming. But Broccoli eventually insisted he would not pay her any more than $80,000, and Deneuve withdrew her name from contention. This part's interesting. With just 4 days to go before Spy Who Loved Me was set to go before the cameras, Barbara Bach was offered the chance to read for a role in the film. She believed the audition to be a minor part and performed her screen test accordingly. It was only after she was offered and accepted the role that she discovered she would be playing the main female protagonist.
Good casting because she's hot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's
not to be all pervy, but have you seen the Playboy picture
I
she's
was
done?
Going to get to that later. Yeah, because for a long time before the Google, I would be like, man, she's hot. I wonder if she's ever been naked. And then one day I'm watching Force 10 from Navarone, and she's naked in like a big pan, like she's taking a bath, like in this pan, and she's just topless, and I'm like, what the fuck? Holy shit. So anyway.
And she's married to a goober,
Ringo Starr. Yeah, he's all right.
He's a cool guy, but he's not a looker. I mean,
right, exactly.
If he wasn't Ringo Starr, she wouldn't be married.
Yeah,
to him.
yeah.
But then again, they've been married for like decades, so not a lot of celebrity couples last.
Well, and
they're still married, so good for them.
It's the same thing with Rick Ocasek and that girl from that movie.
Yeah, that model.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not married anymore because he's not alive.
I know, but they might have broke up before that, but maybe not. Anyway, Kurt Jurgens as Carl Stromberg, Richard Kiel as Jaws, Walter Godel as General Anatole Gogol. Godel is the name, and he plays Gogol. Bernard Lee as M. George Baker is Captain Benson. He's the one that's on the sub at the end.
Yeah.
He's been in a couple Bond films, like playing the guy that's, hang on, I'm looking at it now on the screen. So, and then Desmond Llewellyn is Q. And it was written, Ian Fleming did the characters and uncredited. And then Richard Maibaum and Christopher Wood wrote the screenplay. And Louis Gilbert directed.
Yeah, from what I read, Ian Fleming hated the book.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't give the rights to it, but he gave the rights to the title. So that's how that happened. It was the first Bond movie that was an original story that wasn't written by Ian Fleming up to that point.
Well, that's like that whole thing that you and I kind of talked about it, but didn't go into detail over our texting and stuff, was Thunderball. That whole thing that happened with Thunderball, because Ian Fleming came up with it with Kevin McClory. So then when they came out with the movie, they had to make Kevin McClory the producer, and then Broccoli and Salzman had to be the behind executive producers. So
Well, was that a loophole? Was that how?
And that's how
got
then
remade?
Never Say Never
Which is
Again got
terrible.
remade. And
Just-
that's why Spectre was on hold. Nobody could use the name Spectre, which I'll get to in a minute, because of that. But
Yeah,
it just sucks.
Stromberg. I mean, I like this movie. I like it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like it's like a James Bond greatest hits. You know, they've got everything in there.
Mm-hmm.
And Stromberg is obviously Blofeld. I mean, it's the same character. Pretty much.
But I think he's, out of all the Roger Moore movies, he's probably the weakest bad guy.
Yeah, a little disappointing.
Yeah.
That's one of the flaws of the movie. I used to rate that movie as my favorite James Bond movie, but
Me
I
too.
haven't seen him in a long time, and I just I wanted to watch all of them consecutively to see if I still held that opinion, but
Yeah.
I just haven't been able to. But it's a good movie. And I'm still curious. Once I watch all these Bond movies, I'm still curious. And when I made that declaration, this was a long time ago, because I remember I watched all the Bond movies consecutive order. This was in the 90s, so
Yeah.
there was only like 2 Pierce Brosnan movies at the time, I think. And then I watched. It was like a full James Bond marathon. Took me like several days, and I was like, you know what, Spy Who Loved Me, that's the best one.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if I still hold that same opinion 30 years later, because taste changed. But I watched it and I was like, it's not quite as good as I remember it, but I still like it.
Yeah.
Because it's like I said, it's a greatest hits.
Yeah,
It's got
yeah.
everything, that you would expect in a James Bond movie, all
Yeah,
rolled into
it
one.
hits-
But it's done well.
Yeah, it hits all the beats. No, and that's where I used to do the same thing. I'd be like, Spy Who Loved Me is the best. When everybody asked me what's your favorite, it was that one, then maybe For Your Eyes Only, and then later was like Goldfinger. And it's also because we grew up with the Roger Moore Bond. Then we went back later and watched Sean Connery. It was like, okay, I see the coolness. But it's really good.
Well, and I do think that Roger Moore gets a bad rep. I think he was a really good James Bond. He just did it for too long.
Yeah.
He should have done
Yeah.
like maybe Moonraker should have been his. Well, I would say that should have been his last one, but that would have been ended on a low note. Maybe
Yeah.
For Your Eyes Only should have been his last one.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then if they would have given it to Timothy Dalton and then he could have had 4 movies instead of 2.
Yeah.
The universe would have just been more balanced.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that
yeah.
didn't happen. Instead, they had a 70-year-old James Bond running around,
Exactly. Hey.
breaking his hip.
I
View to Kill.
love. I may not like View to a Kill as much, but I love Octopussy. There's something about Octopussy I really love. But anyway, we're talking about Spy Who Loved Me. Was in many ways a pivotal film for the Bond franchise and was plagued since its conception by multiple problems. First being the departure of one half of the production team. So I didn't know this, I don't think. Harry Saltzman was like forced to sell his half of the film franchise in 1975 for £20 million, as he had branched out into several other unsuccessful ventures and consequently was struggling through personal financial reversals unrelated to Bond. Another troubling aspect of the production was the difficulty in obtaining a director. The producers approached Steven Spielberg, who was in post-production of Jaws, but ultimately decided to wait to see how the fish picture turns out. The first director attached to the film was Guy Hamilton, who had directed the previous 3 Bond films, as well as Goldfinger, but he had just been offered the opportunity to direct the upcoming Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, and decided he'd rather do that, although Richard Donner ended up doing it. Eon Productions would later turn to Lewis Gilbert, who had directed You Only Live Twice, and so with the director finally secured, the next hurdle was finishing the script, which went through several revisions by numerous writers. So this part I really like. So Eon Productions, like we said, it was a 10th Ian Fleming book, and they did not have the rights to use, like what you said, the plot elements of the actual novel itself. And Albert Broccoli commissioned a number of writers to work on a script for the film, including Sterling Siliphant, John Landis, Ronald Hardy, Anthony Burgess, and Derek Marlowe. Even the British television producer, Gary Anderson, the Thunderbirds guy, provided a film treatment. Go ahead.
So all those people had a hand in the screenplay.
And yeah,
So
yeah.
now normally that ends in disaster. 'Cause,
Yeah.
It's like the less people work on a screenplay
Yeah.
tends to be the better.
Yeah.
But I guess it worked for that movie.
Well, and I think so too. And then they originally, so Gary Anderson though provided a film treatment, although originally planned to be Moonraker, much similar to what ended up as The Spy Who Loved Me. Eventually, Richard Maybaum provided the screenplay, and at first he tried to incorporate ideas from all the other writers into his script. Maybaum's original script featured, this is cool, an alliance of international terrorists attacking Spectre's headquarters and deposing Blofeld before trying to destroy the world for themselves to make way for a new world order. After Gilbert signed on as director, he decided to bring in another writer, Christopher Wood. Wood performed a further rewrite, and Gilbert also asked him to fix what he felt the previous Roger Moore films were doing wrong, which was writing the Bond character too much the way Sean Connery played him, and instead portray Bond closer to the books, very English, very smooth, good sense of humor. With Gilbert and Broccoli happy with the proposed changes, the work could finally go underway for The Spy Who Loved Me. Okay, now we're getting into the movie.
And I just looked up, only 2 people wound up on the final credits.
Yeah, that's where, I read that, but that was the boring part.
I was just curious about that, because I was like, wow, that many people worked on the screenplay?
Yeah, exactly. So it starts with this submarine and these vibrations, and then they're like, emergency stations, and you're like, what the fuck's going on? Total loss of power, so they have to come up to the surface.
And by the way, one of those guys is Jeremy Bulloch, who played Boba Fett.
Oh, really?
Empire Strikes Back.
I think I had heard that.
So he's in that scene, and then later in the scene, or in the movie, you could see him.
That's cool. Yeah, I think I knew that, but that's not in my facts. It's good to know. They look through the periscope, and the captain or whatever says, "Oh my God!" And then it just cuts to a guy's talking about losing a Russian sub. Then we are in Russia, and what did I say his name was? Gogol. Yeah. I'm sorry, is talking about the missing sub and wants his best agent on it. Now we see Triple X, and this is where I wrote in there about look up Playboy. Look
by
up
the way,
Barbara Bach.
Did you notice in that scene with the Russian, with like the M counterpart, that they're on a set, but it's matte paintings in the background?
I didn't really notice that. No.
Yeah. But it's interesting because now like a big criticism of movies is like, oh, that's CGI.
Yeah.
But they were basically doing the same thing back then, only it was paintings and rear projection. So they have all these techniques that, in my view, kind of is just like digital effects. It's a special effect.
Yeah, it's the same.
And you can tell that it's not.
It's like when
real.
they're on the boat later.
But it's fine. But it's well done because you could kind of tell because the floor is kind of at a weird angle.
Yeah.
When he's sitting down in the chair, it doesn't quite match right. But just an interesting.
No,
thing. And then you can see when you get to it here, like the rear projection during the skiing shots, the close-ups of Roger Moore.
Of
He's
course.
obviously just standing in front of a green screen and
they
not
did
actually
that.
moving.
They did that big time with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but there's some cool stuff that's real skiing that looks really nice. But she's in bed with her boyfriend. She receives a message and says, okay. Then M asks Moneypenny to have Bond pull out of whatever he is doing. Now we see Bond in bed with a woman, and he receives a message from headquarters telling him to meet with them immediately. He says that he has to go. She says, but I need you. He says, so does England. Bond leaves her and skis away. She then calls on a radio and lets the bad guy know that he is leaving. Now we see them chasing him on skis. They're shooting at him. He turns around and shoots one of them with his ski pole, which is pretty cool. The bad guy that's killed is Triple X's boyfriend, and his name is Michael Billington, who plays Anya's ill-fated lover, Sergei, was considered a candidate for the role of Bond on several occasions in the 70s and 80s. He is best known for his role as Paul Foster in the science fiction series UFO. Probably a British show, but... Then Bond turns back around. They're all heading toward a cliff. Bond skis right off the cliff. He is falling. His skis come off. He continues to fall, and suddenly a parachute comes out, and it has a Union Jack on it.
By the way, great sequence.
It's the best pre-credit.
When he goes off the cliff and they cut the sound.
Yeah.
So it's just, you hear wind and nothing else.
Yeah.
And and then it opens up and the music kicks in.
Yeah, and
it's
they
just
do
a really well done scene.
and they do that on GoldenEye. They do that where he jumps off the dam and it's just silence, and it's like, oh, so cool. And what they said on here that I had read, I didn't write it down here, but when he went off the cliff, they had other cameras filming it, but nobody got it except for that camera that was over on that other mountain. So luckily they got that shot and they just stayed with him. And, you think like, oh shit, is he going to, and then the thing comes out, it's the parachute. And the famous parachute ski jump stunt during the film's pre-title sequence was originally suggested by one-time Bond George Lazenby for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So we have credit to pay to him. But the necessary equipment to film it was not available then, sorry. It was something the Bond producers thought would have been a great idea and had earmarked to use in the first possible opportunity. The Union Jack added in at Lewis Gilbert's request to really signify that Britishness and of Bond, right?
And by the way, if you're a British spy, do you really want
everybody to know
your flag on your parachute?
Well, and it's the same thing though, where everybody goes. He introduces himself to everyone. So how is James Bond supposed to blend in when he's like, "Hey, I'm James Bond, James Bond," and you're like, "Hey, I know that guy." Eon executive Charles Giroux later revealed that during a royal charity screening of The Spy Who Loved Me that was attended by Prince Charles, when the parachute opens with the Union Jack on, he had never seen a reaction in the cinema as there was that night. You couldn't help it. You could not help but stand up. Even Prince Charles stood up.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, but I think the Kingsman directly referenced that movie.
Oh yeah,
because of the parachutes with the flags, because they had the British spy with the British flag, and then the American guy had the American flag.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that was cool. And
I think
then
it was the second one actually, but I don't remember.
And then it was the second one. And then after the parachute, then now the theme song kicks in, which like I said, is great. Like we said, and the opening credits are cool as well. Like with all those Russian soldiers. And then they get knocked over.
Do you know, because I remember watching this movie as a kid on TV, but the credit sequence is full of naked women.
Yeah, that's what I've been talking about.
Do they have an alternate version, or how do they do that?
That's what I was wondering, because Live and Let Die, the title sequence of Live and Let Die really shows like a woman who's not a silhouette and her nipple is showing. And I'm like, holy shit, like that's a nipple. Like that's kind of risque for 1973 when that movie came out. And so with this, it's a lot of like you see the silhouette of a nipple, but you don't, So I think even on TV,
focus, but they're definitely it's definite nudity.
Yeah,
full nudity.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I'm complaining, but
no, exactly.
I don't remember seeing naked women on TV when I was a kid.
Yeah, no, it's interesting those things that you pick up. Yeah, and now you're like, oh, hey. Now we're in General Gogol's office,
and didn't that set like the precedence for title sequences for the rest of the series?
Yeah, well, all of them did. Just Morris Bender was working on all those, and they get better as they go. And then, like I said, even the Daniel Craig ones now are really like Casino Royale's really cool. Like all those are really neat. But yeah, it was at first. Morris Bender's like, I got an idea. Let's have some women swimming in a pool, and I'll just make it silhouetted, and they're naked. And all of a sudden, it was like, wow, that's great. And then that's what they start doing from then on. So, very cool.
Yeah, so it's definitely a benchmark Bond movie.
Yeah. And, and they had done those before. But, yeah, it's a benchmark because, and I'll get to later, that they just went full out because Man with the Golden Gun didn't do so well. And they were like, okay, we're thinking that the whole series is going to end. Excuse me. We need to double up and make it like the best. And that's why they put, all this, kitchen sink in there. The general informs Agent XXX that her boyfriend is dead. He tells her it was a British Secret Service. The general is sending her to Cairo. She says that she's very much wants to meet the person that killed the boyfriend. Bond is landing on a naval ship and gets his briefing. Subs with nuclear missiles are being tracked. They then tell him that he will be going to Cairo to make a bid for the guy for the information on the microfilm for the tracking system. But first, M will give Bond all the details. We now meet the main bad guy. He is paying these two technicians $10 million each because they created this tracking system. But he says that there is someone that is trying to sell the microfilm to the highest bidder. So now you're like, uh-oh. And then he asks that girl, like, can you leave, like, step out? And you're thinking, uh-oh, he's going to kill these guys. And then she gets in the elevator, and then the floor opens, and she drops in, and the windows open, and he can see in there where there's a shark, and the shark eats her, and you're like, holy shit. Like, and...
yeah, and it's rear projection techniques they did.
Yeah.
But if you watch, she falls into the frame from the wrong side.
Yeah.
It's like they didn't reverse.
Well, and then they have...
She steps in the elevator to the left of it. She falls in, and then she falls...
Right, slides out the thing.
Slides out on the opposite side.
Yeah. Well,
So
it could be a twisted...
Yeah, I suppose.
But yeah. But no, and then they show like a real shark like nudging like her belly and whatever, and so it's pretty cool. Then the bad guy sends his name is Strong. I forgot his name already. Anyway, he sends Jaws and that bald guy to go to Cairo and find the person with the microfilm. Also eliminate anyone that comes into contact with the microfilm. And the two technicians are now in a helicopter flying away. They got their money. The bad guy blows up the helicopter and cancels the transfer of $20 million, which is cool. But also then if you think about it practically, like I can't pay you money and then call the bank and go cancel that because they're going to go, where's Brandt's information? We need that to cancel this fully.
Yeah. He didn't actually have to, this is not...
Right,
James
he didn't
Bond
have to send it.
It's
right,
not a
right,
movie
right,
that you
right.
can like... First of all,
To break
just a
apart.
quick side, I really get annoyed with people like, that would never happen in real life.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and like,
yeah.
there has to be there's a balance, you know. It can't be... If
Right,
it's
right.
completely realistic, it's just not fun, and it would take forever to set everything up, you know. But on the other hand, if it's too out there, you know, it's like it's got to be grounded in some sort of reality. But these movies are fun.
Yeah, no,
you know,
and I
you just
know
gotta let it go and have a good time.
I was just making fun. I totally agree. Now Bond is meeting with the connection in Egypt. Bond is now looking for another connection. He's being followed by the two henchmen. A secretary meets with Bond and tells him that she can't tell him if the man is meeting with anyone because it's secret. Suddenly, one of the henchmen shoots at Bond and the woman gets shot and dies. And Bond chases the man. It's that bald guy. Bond and the man are fighting on the roof. Then the man is almost going to fall, and he's holding on to Bond's tie. And Bond lets him like hang there. It's like Untouchables. And then Bond's like, where's Peckish? And the man says he doesn't know. And he starts slipping on Bond's tie, like to the end. And Bond asks him again. And the man says, the pyramids. Bond then hits the man, like just, like knocks the man's arms and, you know, straightens his tie. And the guy falls to his death. And it's like, holy shit. That's brutal. And, but it's really cool. Now we're at the pyramids and Triple X is with Peckish. Bond arrives and sits down. Suddenly Peckish sees Jaws and freaks out. And that's that cool moment where they're playing that music and then the lights come on and there's Jaws.
It's a fantastic sequence.
Yeah.
What they did with the lighting
Yeah.
in that sequence and the audio.
Yeah.
The entire thing is just, it's worth studying if you're into film.
Yeah, yeah,
and
very
lighting
much.
And mood and tone.
And just the way, and it's on-screen music. It's not, you know, dubbed in. It's the music that's playing there and all that.
Location music. Yeah, it's
very
really
cool.
good.
And then Peckish excuses himself because he's freaked out and he's running away and Jaws is following him. And another fact is when filming the chase scene at the pyramids, Richard Kiel got dizzy often and that's because 7'2", the blood takes a while to run up to your head. He had to have most of his stunts done by the stunt double, who put a piece of orange wrapped in tinfoil in his mouth to emulate Jaws' metal teeth. Richard Kiel's son was an extra on set. He appeared during the scene when the Lotus comes out of the water, out of the sea, and drives up the beach. Then the man goes through a gate and locks it with a chain after he goes through. Jaws bites through the chain. The chain that he bites through is actually made of licorice. Pershing has nowhere to go. Jaws slams him against a wall and then bites him to death. Jaws leaves, but Bond confronts him but then the lights go out, and then when they come back on, Jaws is gone. And you're like, holy shit. Bond searches Peckish and finds a date book with a meeting place in it. Then Triple X finds Bond and asks what happened. He tells her, and then 2 of her men fight him, and he beats them up. And then he's like, see you later, and he leaves. And now Bond and her are at this club that was the meeting place. They talk a bit and show that they know each other. So he's like, oh, you like this drink? And she's like, and you like a vodka martini, And then she's like, and you were married once. And then he's like, yeah, okay, let's get off that subject, which they've never brought up. They only bring that up in, of course, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, then in this movie, and then For Your Eyes Only. But that was because then they were able to show Blofeld by For Your Eyes Only.
I think it's referenced in License to Kill, too.
Right. Well, I meant leading up to when he kills, but yeah, you're right. When he kills Blofeld, spoiler alert, on For Your Eyes Only, like that's like the final of like the loop. And what I'm really curious about, to get off subject for a second, not subject, we're still on Bond, but No Time to Die, I was watching a thing on YouTube where it's like, here's what I think it all is. And it says that this will change everything of what you think about Bond or whatever. A lot of people are saying that Rami Malek is playing Dr. No. They're saying that in a way it's going to be in its own time loop, all the Daniel Craig stuff. So it'll be like we saw how he became Bond, became 007. He's going through, at the end now he's going to fight Dr. No. Maybe Dr. No goes to Jamaica, and now he's got to go to Jamaica, and that's where it ends. And it's a prequel to the whole thing.
Oh, interesting.
So, but that's some guy's thing of what he put together
just a
from
fan
the
theory.
trailer. Yeah, but he runs his own thing called Being James Bond. Very cool. But anyway, and then he heads off to meet with the owner of the club, who has the microfilm. He tells the man that he wants to buy what the man is selling. Jaws shows up. The man gets a phone call, and Jaws is like waiting there. He's like in that telephone, looks like he's working on a telephone. And then he beats up the man, and the man gives him the microfilm, and then he bites him to death also. Biting everybody to death. That'd be just, you get blood in your mouth and everything. Bond finds the man's body and searches him for the microfilm.
This was pre-AIDS.
Right,
so.
exactly. Yeah. So you're saying that guy had AIDS. What makes you... Anyway, he did own a club. He's probably sleeping around.
It was
right.
before.
No, I know.
So he didn't have it, so it was
I know,
okay.
right. But he was sleeping around.
Bloodborne pathogens
exactly.
is what it's called. It wasn't such a big deal then.
Bond searches the body, searches guy's body for the microfilm, doesn't find it. He looks outside and sees Jaws walking away. He follows him to a van and gets in the back. And then Agent Triple X is like right there behind him, and she jumps in. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah. By the way, just a thought. Like Jaws, I think is a great villain.
Yeah.
And if you watch this movie, and like the first half of the movie, he's menacing and he's crafty.
Till he drops that.
And then he drops the rock on his foot.
Yeah.
And then boom, slapstick.
Yeah.
And then he just becomes a joke from then on.
Yeah.
Which doesn't do the character justice. And then by the time you get to Moonraker, he's just pure comic relief.
Yeah.
In Moonraker.
Yeah, exactly. They should have left it alone, just like Hinks.
He could have been, and this movie does suffer from not good villains. The main villain is just not that good.
Yeah,
and
that one henchman gets killed right away, knocked off
and then
the
Jaws,
thing.
Which is a great henchman, they just didn't do him justice because they just turned him into a joke as the movie progressed.
Yeah.
And I think that was a mistake.
I think you're right. And then I'm going to make this bigger. Okay. Oh my goodness. Now I made that bigger. Now I got to go back to where I was. Sorry. Keep talking amongst yourselves, everyone. Okay. And then
fix it in post.
Oh yeah. So they get in. Maybe. Jaws walking away, gets in the van, and then she gets in. And while they're talking, Jaws is driving. He's smiling because he can hear them through the little microphone intercom that he has.
Why did he have that?
I was thinking that too. It's a telephone truck. Maybe the guy in the back has to be like, "Hey man, we're out of wire. We got to go stop at the Ace Hardware and get more wire." And he's like, "Okay." I don't know. Don't pick on the movies. You just said it angers you when people do that.
It's still fun to talk about. It just don't. But not to use as
as a
criticism,
crutch of yeah.
That's my point.
And that's what I was doing too. That was my thing.
Oh, I know.
They both, of course, want the microfilm. Jaws pulls in and parks by some old ruins, whatever they are. Jaws gets out and walks away. Bond and her get out and follow. And Bond pulls the keys out of the van, which I really like just in general. It works out because, of course, it's written in the script to do this because she's going to show up. But I like that even if, as a real-life scenario, if Jaws were to beat them up and go to get in the van, he couldn't leave because he wouldn't have the keys.
Yeah. Plus, he was also anticipating what she would do.
Anticipating if she got the microfilm, then right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it was written in the script, of course, but when you're watching it, you're like, oh, that's a cool, like, I really like that moment. And they continue to follow him. He loses them.
And that's a great sequence, too. With this is cinematography with the pillars.
And just with her, like her walking in the back and him walking up the front while they're walking by the pillars.
It's
really
fantastic.
Cool.
And we were talking before we started recording about aspect ratio.
Yeah.
This movie does not work without the full widescreen aspect ratio. Even though I originally saw it on the old days in TV and the different aspect ratio, and we didn't know better back then.
Yeah.
But in this film, just the composition of it and how the camera moves. There's a lot of tracking shots.
Yeah.
And they make use of the columns. And as they're moving through it.
Yeah, and the depth and
everything. Depth. That's another thing. It's just it's a really good sequence visually. Just a visual masterpiece. Yeah,
it's very cool. Then he surprise attacks him. While Jaws and Bond are fighting, she pulls a gun and makes Jaws give her the microfilm. Then while Bond and him are fighting, she runs to the van. Bond knocks the scaffolding down and all this rubble comes down on Jaws. She gets in the van but no keys. Bond arrives and has the keys. He gets in the passenger seat. Jaws jumps on the van and starts pulling it apart. And again, you're like, holy shit, this guy won't stop. He's relentless. And he's just pulling pieces off, and she's trying to get the van out of there, but Jaws is holding on to it.
Yeah, and by the way, I read that she really didn't know how to drive a stick.
Oh, really? Oh,
and so that entire scene is ad-libbed.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they use it in the movie because it works so well.
Yeah.
So like
he's
Roger
like, what
Moore's
other
comments,
tune? Yeah, he's like, what other tune?
That was the actor just coming up with that stuff in
Yeah.
the moment because they stayed in character.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a really good, kind of
little moment,
little funny moment. And then of course, Jaws comes and rips up the van, which is like also a good moment.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. And then they finally get loose, but Jaws is holding a big boulder, but drops it on his foot. And that's where you and I said, like, you didn't need that. Like, you could have kept him just being this menacing, thing. But maybe you want to bring the kids in to have them laugh at this guy or whatever. But now they're driving across the desert. The van breaks down, and that's another cool shot of them just driving across the desert. And she just doesn't care. She's hitting all kind of ruts and things, and you're like, Jesus. And he's just like, whoa, slow down. And then it breaks down, and they have to walk. And you and I talked about this off mic, but they play that Lawrence of Arabia music while they're walking through the desert. It's very cool. And they catch a small fishing boat to Cairo. Bond has this cool handheld thing that he looks at that microfilm. Like, I love that little thing. Like, it's pretty cool. Like, you can put the microfilm in there and look at it. Microfilm was really cool, where you would go to look at the microfiche at the library, and like it'd have all this stuff on one little thing of microfilm or microfiche. Now Bond is trying to sex her up. Then they start to kiss. She then tells Bond that there's no chance. He has his hand on her leg. She pulls her dress up and pulls a cigarette case like out of her garter belt. And she pulls the cigarette out, and before he can light it for her, she blows some knockout dust on him twice, and Bond gets knocked out. And he awakens, and the boat people say that the woman left. He then walks to some other ruins, and you see like he starts in his suit and his jacket and his tie, and then you see him holding his jacket and his tie's untied, and he's been walking for a while. And then he opens a secret passage, and there's Moneypenny, and she tells him to go in. And what I didn't like is I've talked about in every single movie there's a cool tat-a-tat with Moneypenny, and it's really cool, and you know that they're never going to get together, but it's just them acting together is really cool. This was the only one that only used her to go in there. Like,
Yeah,
she's
it's
literally the
missing.
secretary. And he enters and sees General Gogol. M then shows up to talk to Bond. He introduces him to the general, and now we see Triple X is there as well. They are now going to work together. And this is still during the Cold War.
Yeah, I was
so
about
this
to
is
say
kinda,
that this was a big deal
Yeah.
because a lot of people now who were just too young or not
Yeah.
even alive then,
Yeah,
like Russia and the United States were such
Yeah.
polar opposites, and there was so much fear
yeah.
of each other. So to
Yeah.
do this in the 70s,
Nuclear war and
which
all
they
this.
started to do
yeah.
it more in the 80s in terms
Yeah.
of humanizing the other side and stuff.
Yeah.
But at that point, I imagine. I mean, I was like 3 years old then, so I don't remember. But
Right.
I would imagine it was like a really big deal.
Yeah.
For the audience to see this kind of collaboration.
Yeah, yeah.
Between these characters.
Yeah, and how were you at that time? Were they like, that's not right? Like real Americana, like Make America Great Again guys were like, that's wrong. You know, they shouldn't be friends. They shouldn't work together. Bond tells him that the microfilm is missing an important information because he's already looked at it. And they figure that they will ask Q if he can find like the missing stuff. So we also hear M's real first name at this time, like you've never heard it before. His name's Miles. When he's like, go ahead, General, he calls him his first name. And the General's like, you first, Miles. And you're like, holy shit, that's M's name is Miles. And
I didn't catch that.
And
Interesting.
And in addition, Q is referred to by his real name, Major Boothroyd, which hadn't been used since From Russia with Love when he first showed up. Like he was in Dr. No, but it wasn't Desmond Llewellyn, it was somebody else. And they were known as Major Boothroyd. Then he became Q in From Russia with Love. However, Miss Moneypenny would be left out without a first name until it was revealed to be Eve in Skyfall 35 years later. So that's interesting. Now they're in Q branch. I really like that magnetic tray that shoots across, and he's like, "Get that ready for so and so's dinner tonight," and you're like, "Oh, awesome!"
Yeah, again, that sequence is a must in all the Bond movies.
Yeah, yeah.
Is the gadgets,
showing all
which
the
I don't
stuff.
think they do those in the Craig movies, do they?
I don't think so. No, they don't. Yeah, because they're trying to make. They're slowly working up to.
But they stripped out the comedy
goofy,
and the goofiness, which is endearing in the older Bond movies.
Yeah, he had the gun with the fingerprints that it would read his hand, and that was like real. And some of the stuff that they would have were like real stuff. Like on You Only Live Twice, they had a real gun that shot out of a cigarette, but you couldn't aim for shit, so they were like, "Oh, we'll get rid of that." But no, it was really cool. And then and that hookah machine gun, that's pretty cool. And it was all stuff for that area of the world.
Right.
So like, it wasn't like general, it was just for there. They look at the microfilm, and Bond and her try to one-up each other. So I like that, where he's like, "Oh, it's this," and she's like, "No, actually, the place is over here in Sardinia or something." And he's like, "Oh," and so they realize that they're from Sardinia, so they head there. Now Bond and her are on a train. She says that she needs to go to bed. Bond goes to his adjoining room, but he has champagne in 2 glasses, and he's waiting for her to want to join him. She goes to hang up her robe, and Jaws is in the closet. And that shows, like, how big he is. Like, he's got to hunch over, and all you see is, like, his nose and his mouth because he's, like, in that closet. And then he punches her and knocks her out. And then he's getting ready to bite her to death again. Bond hears the commotion and comes in and starts fighting Jaws. And like I said, this man's 7'2", and when he's fighting Roger Moore, and when he throws him up against that wall sideways, like you're like, holy shit, and then pushes him up against a roof, and you're like, Jesus Christ. And
and again, but their final fight becomes so like lackluster and unsatisfying.
Yeah, well, and this fight and other fights, like I talked about Hinks in Spectre. Hinks was a good bad guy. That was Dave Bautista. And they had a cool fight in the train, and that was like a really cool fight. But anyway, this was a good fight on this train. And then also Red Grant, Quint from Jaws, they had a good fight on From Russia with Love in the train. And then Bond breaks the lamp and exposes the wires, and then pushes that on Jaws' teeth, and it like electrifies all around his mouth. Pretty cool special effect.
Yeah, it was almost a pre Jason Bourne moment.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the spy like just makes use of
He just grabs whatever.
what he has available.
and then Bond kicks him out the window. Jaws gets up and straightens his tie. Like, he's as cool as Bond. Like, he's been pushed out of a moving train, and he just stands up, straightens his tie, and walks away. And it's like, holy shit.
And I hate to beat this, but imagine if he was like like the Terminator.
Yeah.
Where he's just
Yeah,
constantly
just
coming
relentless.
and seemingly unstoppable.
Well,
that would have like added so much tension to the film.
and I was going to bring the new Terminator, but I didn't because I forgot. But that new Terminator, he's relentless. He like won't stop, and it's really, really good. It's a really good movie.
I haven't seen it yet.
But back to Bond.
Want to, but
but then Bond helps doctor her up, and then she helps doctor him up, and then they make out. Now they're in Sardinia. They arrive on the docks, and a ferry is there, and off drives a white Lotus Esprit. And so this part's cool. Maybe I won't read into it, but so Lotus wanted their car in the film, and they were like, how do we do this? And also the Bond producer were looking for a new car to use in the upcoming movie. Rather than contact the production team to try and persuade them to use their latest model, a prototype Esprit is discreetly parked outside the production office at Pinewood Studios. The ploy worked. Cubby Broccoli saw the vehicle and insisted it be used in the film. Demand for Lotus Esprits surged after the film was released, with many new customers being placed on a 3-year waiting list. As for the actual one featured in the movie, it was purchased for £616,000 to a London auction in October 2013 by Elon Musk, who plans to rebuild the vehicle and attempt to make the fictional dual-purpose car be an actual dual-purpose car, good both underwater and on land. And if anybody can do it, Elon Musk can do it.
and the design of that car works so well for the submarine sequence.
Yeah. It's a wedge,
like an Aston Martin, which is the iconic
common,
James Bond car. It wouldn't have worked as well for what it needed to be in this movie.
Yeah, well, and that's what, I showed my wife. I was like, honey, look, this is a car I want. She goes, this is a car you want? I go, just because it was in a movie. Like, I want that. I want the General Lee. I want the Bandit car. I want all these cars. And, and she goes, it looks like a piece of shit. I go, it might be. It's like a Lotus. Like, who knows how good the motor is, how good the car is. But it'd be cool to have one. Yeah,
it's like
especially if you can get them for
DeLorean,
cheap.
like everyone thinks is a cool car,
yeah.
but it's like it breaks down constantly.
Do you watch Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah. When it literally breaks down.
He picked up Patton Oswalt, and it broke down.
And they had to get a new car.
Yeah, it's so good.
So
and that's what happened. I talked about on my one episode where I watched that making of. It was like a documentary / movie about DeLorean. And they talked about how Johnny Carson was the first one to buy one, and then it broke down on the freeway, and he had to ask somebody to help him. And if the battery would die, you couldn't get out of the car because the doors were...
And I also heard people got stuck in busy parking lots.
Yeah.
Because the doors couldn't clear the doors that were parked next to them.
I was thinking that because, speaking of Elon Musk, I'm thinking of getting a Tesla maybe in a couple months, and... that other Tesla, the Y or the X, has those back doors that open like gull wings like that. And I'm thinking, well, that's cool. But now when you go to park, if you're going shopping, you have to park way far away and make sure nobody parks by. Now you're going to be the asshole who parks in the middle of 2 spots. And somebody's going to fuck with your car because they don't realize you have to open these doors wide. But anyway, Q then explains to Bond some of the cool things that it does. And there's one part where he's kind of pointing out things, and you don't hear him say it, but he's pointing at the back of it, like what it does, and you can't hear it. Then when we join him, when Triple X is there, now we can hear him going, oh, and it does this and does that. And he doesn't get finished, and Bond's just like, okay, I've never let you do, and like takes off, and you're like, oh, wait. But it's kind of cool because what I do hate about Bond films, and I talked about this already, so I won't repeat it, I'll tell you off mic, but that it's always... here's your gadget, and it just happens to be used in the mission you're on because that's what you exactly needed. And I guess I'll tell it because you haven't heard it yet. Die Another Day, horrible movie, but has a cool part where he's sliding on the top of the roof of his car, It's upside down on the ice, and he hits the ejector seat to knock the car back over onto its wheels. And you're like, oh, that wasn't meant for that. He's thinking outside the box, like with the lamp, electric, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that's a good point.
it's
And
very
that is
cool.
that's a much better way to do it than like you said. It's like it turns out to be
Yeah,
the perfect thing he needed for the situation that he had no idea that he would be in.
yeah, exactly. And then they arrive at the hotel. They have been invited to meet with Mr. Stromberg. That's his name. A speedboat picks him up and takes him to the lair, to his Atlantis. Bond meets Stromberg in his office. Ken Adams' cool design again. Excuse me, really cool, like that office, like that whole, the other stuff too we'll get to when they get onto the ship. But Ken Adams does, because also you haven't heard, I'm sorry for people who have heard it already repeated, Ken Adams did the war room in Doctor Strangelove. Yeah.
Yeah.
So very cool. Stromberg has webbed hands, does not like to shake hands with people, and he loves the ocean. Also, he thinks Bond is Mr. Sterling. So Bond's undercover, and she's Mrs. Sterling. He's Mr. Sterling, and then after, then Bond leaves, and then he is shown a model. She shows him this model of the ship, and she's like, "Isn't that pretty cool?" And Bond's like, "Yeah, that's pretty neat." And then they walk away, and then they leave. They get on the boat and they leave on the speedboat. And then Jaws comes in and tells Stromberg. Stromberg's like, "Are those the guys in Cairo?" And he's like, "Yes, they are." And he's like, and Stromberg says that when Bond and her get on land to kill them. So now you're like, oh, fuck. And this is something where I'm going to get into it. It's all broken down, but where just everything it's not just like a chase and then the end. It's like motorcycle chase, car chase, helicopter chase, going underwater, like all this stuff.
Yeah, it's a great sequence.
But now they're on land. They're being chased by a motorcycle with sidecar on it. The motorcycle rider launches his sidecar, but it misses and blows up a trailer of a diesel. And what's funny, when you watch this as a kid, you're like, oh, man, that's cool. When my wife just happened to, wake up at the time that I'm watching this, she goes, which one is this? I go, it's Spy Love Me. Which Bond is this? I go, it's Roger Moore. She goes, okay. And she's never seen any of the Bond movies. And she goes, and they launched that sidecar, and she goes, it's going to blow up that truck. And I go, honey, how'd you know? She goes, I wrote it. I was like, yeah, but it's all practical now, I mean, it's all things that you automatically go, yeah, of course it's going to do that. So it missed. Bond moves out of the way and drives in front of the thing and blows up that diesel trailer. Then the motorcycle drives off the cliff.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
a quick aside. I mean, these classic movies,
Yeah,
these cliches weren't cliches then.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
when you're seeing that in 1977,
Yeah.
you're not anticipating that because
Exactly.
you're seeing fresh things.
Exactly. And that's what I tell her a lot. I'm like, that wasn't known before. Like, this is just, way cool stuff. The guys in the car start shooting at them, and Jaws is one of the men in the car. Bond sprays them with cement out of the back, and they go off a cliff. And my wife's like, just hit the brakes. I'm like, yeah, I know. But Jaws survives. So he walks. That's another corny, comedy moment where they land in that farmhouse, and then he just walks out and
I
dusts
still
himself
like
off.
it. I think,
Yeah,
I think
me
that's
too.
still, that moment is funny, but it still works.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah.
they had kept that character
Yeah.
as menacing as they should have, that moment would have still worked.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you still couldn't kill him. Yeah, exactly. Now a helicopter is chasing them and shooting at them, and it's the girl that was in the speedboat with him. They drive off the pier and into the water. Suddenly the car turns into a submarine. Then Bond shoots a missile out of the top of the car and blows up the helicopter, and they're heading to investigate Stromberg's lair. And now that whole scene, I'm going to give it away now because we're not at the end of the Roger Moore movies, but the best gadget Bond ever got was that submarine car. It's the coolest. When you saw it then, when you see it now, you're just like, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it also makes sense for him to have it.
Yeah.
If he was investigating a guy who has an
a lair
underwater fortress.
Yeah.
It would make sense that, okay, you would have this car that could turn into a submarine, so it wasn't just, a plot car.
Yeah, exactly. And then even when they're down in the water, now some scuba guys are trying to attack them. And so now they have they use the black ink to almost like a smoke thing, and then they use a depth charge and they kill everyone.
Yeah, and I also like that they hit the submarine car and actually put it in danger because it was leaking.
Yeah, it started
so it
leaking.
wasn't.
Yeah, It wasn't
Those older
impenetrable.
Bond movies needed more of that because he was kind of a superhero
Yeah, yeah.
who never did anything wrong.
Yeah,
Like in later Bond movies, they started making him more,
yeah, more fallible or more,
which makes for a more interesting character.
Yeah.
and also makes you, it just creates more tension and it's
Yeah.
just a better experience. So in that movie, there is a touch where now the car is it's compromised and they have to get out. So it didn't play quite as well as it could have, but it still was a good touch.
But still, what I always like, even though Bond is a superhero or made to be that way, what I love is that on the inside I feel that he's kind of freaking out, but he's so cool on the outside where he's going to get killed by bad guys, and you only live twice. Blofeld points a gun right at Sean Connery, and he's like, now you're going to die, and Connery just stands there and wait, like, but that in his head he's thinking, how do I get, where he's not like, don't kill me. And like here, when it's leaking, and she's like, what are we going to do? Because then after they destroy everybody, now there's 2 leaks.
That's because he's shaken, but not
and
stirred.
that's right. And then she go, and then what I do like is, remember, she's like, she pushes a button for the missile, and he's like, for the depth charge. And he goes, how did you know that was there? She goes, I saw plans for this 2 years ago. And you're like, oh, cool. So, and now it has 2 leaks. They drive out of the water and onto the beach. And that part's just cool. Like you said, the way that's made is a wedge, and it's just cutting through the water and driving up on the sand.
Yeah, and that guy who, he's got the booze bottle.
I was reading that.
He's in Moonraker. The
Yeah.
same guy in the same.
He's in a couple. But there's a couple things. The scene where Bond comically drops a fish out of the Lotus, which I don't like, out of the Lotus window after emerging from the sea, was added by him. That was a joke by him.
I chuckled when I.
Yeah. I did too. But then you go, but the water wasn't inside. Like, it was leaking in small holes. But yes, I chuckled as well. Also, you likely remember the famous scene where a man is drinking his wine as Bond's Lotus emerges from the beach. But you might not know that the man is actually the assistant director of the Italian location shoot, Victor Torjansky. The scene became something of a Bond in-joke, and Torjansky would return in similar appearances in another 2 Bond films shot in Italy, Moonraker and For Your Eyes Only. So now I get to watch those when I watch Moonraker.
I don't remember the For Your Eyes Only scene. I remember the Moonraker scene because it's the gondola. Isn't it? Because
it comes
drives
off.
up
Yeah, it
the
drives.
beach.
Yeah, and I think on For Your Eyes Only, it might be like in the skiing village or something, maybe, or somewhere. Anyway, I'll let you know when
it's
we
funny,
get to it.
because I remember Moonraker more than I remember For Your Eyes Only, but I don't like Moonraker.
Right.
And I know that I like
For
Your Eyes Only, but I don't remember. But
yeah,
just interesting.
Yeah, no, exactly. Bond now receives a message about the real ship of the model that he saw. He then tells her that they're going to be going to it. He then goes to light her cigarette, and she compliments him on the lighter. This part was a really good scene. He says that he got it in Bergarten. She then finds out that he killed her boyfriend. She tells him that when this mission is over, that she will kill him. So that's a cool moment where they're kind of having this nice moment, and then she sees that lighter. She's like, nice. He goes, Bargarten, or wherever he was at. And she's like, my boyfriend was there, and you killed my boy. And he's like, look, when people are coming after me and they're shooting guns, I have to protect myself, And she's just like, well, when this mission is over,
that was a really good scene. And it was a bit darker in tone than the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
I still kind of think they should have had more of that. They should have explored that tension between the 2 characters more. I've used the word tension so many times, and I don't know why.
But no,
I guess it's my favorite word.
Yeah, ranking up. Well, yeah, this episode brought to you by tension. Yeah.
It could have just been done better from a writing standpoint, I think.
Also go see the horror movie High Tension, the French film. Now they are being lowered onto a submarine. Bond and her board. They are looking at, and so I like there where they get off, and then he's like, all these men are, he's going to introduce himself, and she pulls her helmet off, and she's a woman, and he's like, oh, I didn't know you were a woman. She's like, when I'm here, my name is Major, Asimova, or whatever her name is. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, and another thing, This movie was in 1977, so it was still an era when actors refused to cut their hair.
Yeah.
So like every military scene in any movie from like the late 60s to the early 80s, like nobody will cut their hair. So
had long-haired people. Yeah. And then they're looking after the ship they are suspicious of. Now the vibrations are starting, like we saw in the beginning. They surface and the ship is right behind them. It opens up and swallows them up, and then they wait.
And then one of maybe the best shot in the entirety of all the James Bond movies is the inside of that hangar.
Yeah.
When they bring it in, and Stanley Kubrick did the lighting.
That's
told them to like keep it a secret.
Yeah, that's my next. Yeah,
but
uncredited.
But it's a really good shot. Again, would not work on the pan and scan cropped version.
Right. Yeah.
The composition, the symmetry, and the lighting, and it's a really
it would have to
shot.
be panned and moved, and it just wouldn't work. No, and like I said, again, more cool Ken Adams production, and the 007 soundstage at Pinewood Studios for many years, the largest in the world, was specially constructed for this film. And then I have the Stanley Kubrick thing.
It's still used to this day.
It's called the Liparus, is where they're at on board the ship. Stromberg tells everyone to get off the submarine. They do, which I told my wife, I go, these are military guys. They're going to be like, no, we're here. Yeah. We're going to die.
And who are all these henchmen? They always have like orange jumpsuits. But it's like, are they hired?
It's like Kevin Smith on the building of the Death Star on Return of the Jedi. Like these guys are like, do you answer an ad?
Or were they all just recruited and convinced that like, we need to like live underwater?
I love water. Yeah, I want to live there.
Do they have health benefits?
Yeah,
do they have 401k? They're very loyal.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like what was that Simpsons episode where they spoofed that?
I think they had like a Bond, like they were gonna cut Bond, and it had the whole laser like Goldfinger.
No, it's the Scorpio guy.
Oh yeah,
where he hires Homer, and he moves to the town that he built. It turns out he's like this super villain, and he's got all these henchmen and everything. Yeah, but he's like a super nice boss. So like Homer's torn, like, but you're evil.
Homer's like, but I don't know. Yeah.
And then and of course Austin Powers spoofed the henchmen stuff too. In that movie, but it's funny because it's
and that's the thing with these old Bond films that then Austin Powers makes fun of them, so you get the comedy of it. But now when you go to rewatch them, in a way, other people that I've talked to, it's hard for them to watch just as a Bond movie and not like make fun of it because it's been parodied. But it's like, no, these are cool.
No, I don't recall. It's been so long since I've seen the older movies. Was this the first of the jumpsuit wearing henchmen, or was that done before?
No, there was one really cool. Ken Adams, I love You Only Live Twice. Ken Adams did that whole under volcano thing. It was huge. There's pictures on my Instagram and Facebook of how big it was. And he had like henchmen in yellow, red, and gray, I think. And it's cool because when they're all moving around, it really pops and really looks cool. But yeah, there's a bunch of them. And you're like, where'd they come from? And then Bond tells Triple X that like he'll keep her hidden. He's like, stay with me.
Do their families live on the base with them?
I wouldn't think so. I think that's either like you're a bachelor or that you're like, honey, I'm not going to see you for a year because we're going to do this.
But the idea was to all go live underwater.
Right,
and like all males. Civilization again,
all
but
males.
They were all men.
That's right.
Is that why he kidnapped Triple X? Because he realized
maybe he's like, oh, hey, yeah. And then she's like, yeah.
Because the other woman he killed, and then this other woman got killed in the helicopter.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. Oh, goodness. And then as they
none of this matters.
Yeah,
for the
exactly.
Film.
No, but
it's just fun.
It's fun to speculate on. As they are being let off the submarine, a guard notices that she is a woman, and then Bond tries to fight them too, but they are taken to Stromberg. They are now in Stromberg's office. His plan is to annihilate the world, and that he wants there to be a world under the sea. Now they open the ship again, and both submarines leave now with Stromberg's men in it. He then leaves for his lair and takes Triple X with him. And that's pretty cool, even though it's like a miniature thing and everything. But I like that speedboat, like the pod shoots out, and then the pod breaks open, and then the speedboat lands and takes off. It's like really cool looking.
That was cool.
And Bond starts fighting all the guards. He then makes his way to the two submarine crews that are locked up. The bad guys try to seal the operations room. There's a big fight. They do seal it. maybe larger than You Only Live Twice, this fight. It was like huge. That's why, like we said, they took over the whole thing. They need to get to the control room. Bond says that they need to use a nuclear missile. And I've realized this. So I put here a tense moment, Bond pulling out the detonator and not touching the sides. Here's what I've noticed. And people call me stupid. My wife's like, do you know anything else other than movies? I've learned a lot from movies. I've learned from Broken Arrow, a nuclear bomb cannot go off. And, if it's submerged in gasoline for 3 days, it will not go off. And then you notice this with, like, I'm just pulling the detonator out. So the nuclear thing won't go off because I'm pulling the detonator out to use with our C4. And you're like, oh, and all the stuff you've learned about C4 and things like, when you're watching Die Hard, oh, he's got C4 and he's got the detonators. He needs the detonators to put with C4, so cool. But anyway, that's so call me stupid for liking movies, but that's what I learned.
No, you're a very intelligent guy. You're not stupid.
I see your nose growing. They need to get to the control room.
I have no reason to kiss your ass.
Oh, okay. Well, that is true. They need to get to thank you. They need to get to the control room. Bond says that they need the nuclear missile. Oh, I already wrote. Sorry about that. They use a detonator on a plastic explosive to get in the control room. There's a camera ball, and Bond jumps on that, so they can't see him coming. So he jumps on the top of that, and as he's riding it across, that Bond music comes on. It's really cool, like he's just riding that thing, and then he sets the explosives and he gets on that thing to leave, and they're like, the things aren't working, the monitors aren't working, the cameras. So they go, we'll re-switch, and they turn off the power so he can't get away, and then they flip it back on to see, and then he starts going, but it's like, it's going to blow up, and he's like, oh shit. I'm like, drop into the water. And then the explosive goes off, and they enter. Bond is too late. So at first he's like, the guy's like, you got 4 minutes. And then a captain is like, we have 3 minutes. And it's like, oh, shit. And they reprogram the missiles to destroy each other. So they tell each sub the location of the other and vice versa. And after a tense but not really moment, both subs explode in a nuclear explosion. So it's like, and again, maybe it was because now we're used to, well, the movie's going to end happy. It's not going to blow up. So you know that, but they really drug that out. Like, dun, 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 dun. Anyway, and then those explode, and they're nuclear missiles. And so I wrote here, which that fallout has got to hurt some people.
Yeah, I was about to say, of course they destroy the entire world's sea life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and all those people, it's like Hiroshima all over. Wherever they were on that, it's going to reach land, and people go, wait a minute, I'm feeling sick.
It would create tsunamis and all kinds of problems. But,
now
but it's James Bond. So
there's an interesting thing when you watch From Russia with Love and you listen to my episode. There's an interesting thing with the guy that plays the bad guy in that got cancer from like a nuclear thing where they were testing in Nevada. And he was filming a movie, and a lot of people in that movie ended up dying because of the radiation. It was still there.
Yeah, I read a story in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. This family was out camping, and they thought it was snowing, and they were catching the snowflakes on their tongue.
Oh, shit.
But it was nuclear fallout from the testing in the desert, because nobody knew how
yeah.
And they all, got sick and had tumors all over their bodies and stuff.
Oh, my
gosh.
gosh.
It's so sad when you hear about that. So, great downer moment for your James Bond
Well, now
podcast.
we're getting to the better ones. Cancer sucks. Now the ship is starting to explode, and they get in the other submarine. So there's one submarine left. They all get in that, and they blow a hole with the torpedo in the front where it's supposed to open, but they don't have access to the control panel. Blow a hole in the ship, and they escape, and then the ship sinks. And it's really cool, and it's miniature, but it looks cool. It doesn't, like you said, those special effects, some of those, even the rear projection stuff, it's like really, some of that is like, that's really good. Some of it pulls you out a little bit when Bond's skiing, and you're like, especially in, I think, For Your Eyes Only, he's skiing, and there's a part where he takes a part of something off, and he's using it as like a snowboard. But that was when snowboards were first becoming famous. Nobody had seen that. So anyway, it was pretty cool. And then it plays some surf music. But anyway, we're not on that movie. We're on Spy Who Loved Me. Now they are approaching Stromberg's lair. They have orders to blow up the Atlantis. Bond says that he has to save her. Captain says that they have their orders. Bond says, give me 1 hour. And the captain's like, no, we have our, we got to. And so then Bond's like, 40 minutes. And then Bond asks for the package that Q sent. and they bring him a package and he puts it together. And what somebody was saying on one of the things I was watching was that would have been cool if they cut out where he's putting it together and he just said, "Where's that package Q sent?" And then it cuts to him on that little jet
that's
ski.
a good observation. That would have been much more
And I
economical.
was that would have been cool, and would have just led you right in, like badass. And now we see that it is a jet ski. Bond arrives at the Atlantis. Stromberg comes on over the intercom and tells him to go ahead and come up the elevator. Bond gets on the elevator, and now you're like, my wife was even watching, and she's like, and the window to the sea opens, and Stromberg pushes a button and waits to see him dropping in to be eaten by the sharks. And like I said, my wife's like, oh, or maybe that was later. Anyway, sorry. I think she was like, uh-oh. And I'm like, no, just wait. And then he doesn't drop. And then when the elevator shows up, he's like straddling, like got his legs across the thing, and the bottom is dropped out, but he didn't fall.
Yeah, and they did a good job with that because when they set up that elevator early in the movie,
Yeah.
and then later,
Yeah.
when James Bond is on that elevator, he looks down at the floor,
Yeah.
and there's a close up of the floor, and he knows that he can see that there's a door.
Yeah.
So that's why he knew.
I'm wondering, I don't remember him looking at the floor and seeing the opening. I wonder if you put that in your head.
No, there wasn't an opening, but he could see the floor.
No, because I don't remember that shot of him looking at the floor, but that's why I
Yeah,
was
it's
thinking
in there.
maybe. Okay.
I'm pretty positive.
Okay,
unless
cool.
you were right, and I imagine
I
that,
was.
but-
You're probably right. Maybe I was
usually
looking at
am.
my wife when she said that. Yeah.
No, I'm not. How many times have been wrong on your podcast so
And
far? I think
that's
at least
okay.
once every one. Like,
Yeah, well,
really wrong about
well,
something.
we'll see. I'll rewatch it and we'll see. He steps in to talk to Stromberg. Stromberg has his hand on a bolt gun under the dinner table and tells Bond to sit down. Bond does. That's when my wife was like, "Oh shit!" Like she's like, "He's going to shoot him." Stromberg pulls the trigger and Bond jumps out of the way and then puts his gun at the tube and shoots. Then he shoots again. Then he stands up and shoots again, and then steps over to the side and shoots him again. Like Ford, like this is the brutal Bond that Roger Moore was, a little more than Sean Connery. Sean Connery was the blunt instrument, and like I've explained on the last one, or on Live and Let Die, was the first Bond where Roger Moore was more, of a brutal person, even though Sean Connery was. But anyway.
I still wish they would have written that villain better, though.
Yeah,
because
he's always eating.
Well,
and he's,
when his entire plan was foiled.
Yeah,
Like everything that he was trying to do was undone by James Bond.
yeah,
So you'd think he would have been.
yeah.
There
But-
should have been a better moment. between
But
the two.
what I love about it is that it does end so quickly. You're like thinking it's going to be the villain giving his big speech, and he's going to try to kill Bond. He's going to trap him somehow, and all this. But instead, all that's already happened, and now Bond just shows up and is like, "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to save her, and we're out of here." And so it's not a lot of, I'm twirling my mustache. I'm angry. It's
no,
just
not like
boom,
that.
he's
But
killed.
just he should have been unhinged.
Right, no,
he should have
no,
been
yeah,
angry,
yeah.
like livid. Just
Yeah. There should have been a whole a John Wick type shootout in the of them running and yelling at each other. That would have been cool. Not Bond yelling. Bond would have been cool. He would have been like, die, motherfucker. Like, what was that on? Die, motherfucker. He's shooting at the guy. Can't think of it. Anyway, Bond then runs into Jaws after Stromberg dies. And he and Jaws fight. Bond lowers a magnet down. Why they have a magnet there, I didn't really investigate. I was wondering, like, why is there a magnet above the water unless they're moving boats or something? I don't know. Bond looks up at the magnet. Jaws looks up and gets stuck to the magnet with his metal teeth. Bond raises the magnet high and then drops Jaws into the water with the shark. So I was telling my wife, like, look, Jaws is in the water with the shark. And she goes, Jaws is going to eat Jaws? And I go, yeah, that's what they were going for. And Jaws and the shark fight. Jaws bites Jaws to death. Bond, meaning the metal tooth guy, eats the shark, eats Bruce the shark. Anyway, Bond finds Triple X and unties her. He tells her that Stromberg is dead. He tells her that they need to hurry. On the submarine, they fire the torpedo to blow up the Atlantis. And this is what I kind of like, and they don't really go into it. It's more for suspense of it. But the way I like to look at it is Bond knows, I got 40 minutes. If that took longer than 40 minutes, they're like, no, we're going to launch the missile. We're not worried about you. And it was on Her Majesty's Secret Service. One of the guys was like, but what about Bond? He's like, he knows the plan. And that's all he had to say was like, if he dies, he dies. You know, so cool. And then the place starts blowing up. Her and him now find an escape pod and get in it. They launch it. The place completely explodes. Now Bond and her are floating in an enclosed escape pod. Bond notices some champagne, of course, and gets ready to open it. And he's like, oh, maybe he's not that bad. Dom Perignon 52. And she picks up the gun on the bed and aims it at him and tells him that the mission is over, meaning that she will now kill him. He then pops the champagne, which you're supposed to think is a gunshot, and be like, oh, my God, she shot him. And then they talk a bit. She doesn't kill him, and they have sex. Then their government finds them, and he's like,
she's had all of like 5 days to get over the love of her life.
Exactly. and then he's like, they'll never find us. And then of course they look through the window and they're like, hey, what's going on? And they look inside and see both of them are naked under the covers. M asks Bond what he's doing. He says, keeping the British end up, sir. And so at the end it says, the end of The Spy Who Loved Me. James Bond will return, and for your eyes only. So the closing credits said that, but because of the success of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the space-themed Moonraker was chosen for the next Bond film to be produced.
And it's terrible.
Ugh. But I'll be doing that with Joe Merle. And
they're all flying around in space with their little laser
guns.
It's so bad.
It's like G.I. Joe. It's like, no, I can't wait for that one. I haven't seen it for a while, so I think that'll be fun. Hey, we did that pretty good. We're at an hour and 11 minutes.
Great.
So, well, thank you for joining me. I hope
You're welcome.
everybody enjoyed it. It was very cool. And, we'll have to figure out about those bad guys. Maybe you and I should have worn just plain red shirts so we look like bad guys. And then we could have taken a picture. But, all right. Well, like I said, James Bond and me will return in Moonraker and with Joe Merle. And then... I don't know when Brandt will join me again, but
whenever
we'll
you want me.
All right.
I enjoy doing these, so.
All
thanks.
right. Well, then we'll have to plan maybe one of the Pierce Brosnans or something. So, okay. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good day and a good night and a good whatever. Truman Show type stuff. All right. Goodbye.